All right, welcome back, everyone. To those who are just joining us, welcome. Thank you for logging on. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. It could be quite late, depending on where you are right now. So we really appreciate you taking the time to join us. For those who are just joining, my name is Emily Hatt. I'm part of the operational efficiency team at the Global Fund, and I'll be taking you through the session today along with my colleague Darius. So Darius, I'll let you introduce yourself for the new joiners.
Hi, everyone. My name is Darius Iwarn. I'm also part of the operational efficiency team and very glad to be here. And thank you for taking the time to join this session.
Thanks, Darius. So for the second portion of this information session, or for just this section, I guess, we'll be taking you through the closures and financial closure report. So this will run until about 3:30. And we'll go through an overview of the closure key changes. Then we'll go into the FCR, the content of the FCR, as well as what it looks like in Partner Portal. Then we'll have a brief section on next steps and resources, and then we'll have time for questions and answers. So as per the first session, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please do add them in the chat, and our colleagues will collect them and we'll answer all the questions at the end of the session. So Darius, over to you.
Thanks, Emily. So I'll start with a little bit about closures and what's changed. So what's new is the closure process for a particular grant will be completed when both regular and C19RM financial closure processes have been completed. So that's one thing that's different from before. In terms of what's been simplified, I think part of that is the first step is more internal, but the cash balances, for example, at the end of the IP is directly linked to subsequent IPs for continuing grants, and there's also a status between the recoveries module on closure. So I'm going to go in the next slide and talk about three specific situations. So one is a GC6 grant that does not have any C19RM component. So that will follow the regular closure process. So the GC6 regular grant only will not change the actual closure process, but we will talk about the actual financial closure report and the content and the process for that, which is a bit different. For GC6 regular grants that also have a C19RM closure, so they're combined, basically merged into one set of closure reports if the C19RM the C19RM portion has the same end date as the regular grants or earlier. So they're merged into one closure process and done at the same time. For grants where C19RM continues on past the end of the GC6 IP, so those, for example, that ended, the regular grants ended in December 2023, and C19RM continues into 2024 and 2025, there'll be a separate set of closure requirements for the C19RM portion. So you kind of close the GC6 regular grant portion, and then a C19RM closure process will be initiated later once the C19RM portion of the IP comes to an end. And then there'll be more sessions and more information coming that in the coming weeks. Now, just to kind of lay out what's changed and what's new. So FCR has now been fully embedded into PR reporting. So as we saw for the PC and the PUDR, last PU, the FCR form, the financial closure report, will follow the same process and will be embedded as part of PR reporting. It is fully online in the same way that the PU is fully online. So for both the PRs and LFA, they'll access, complete, and submit all the information in the partner portal. The FCR will also have all the data quality checks in Partner Portal to help the PRs with the right first-time submission. So if critical data is missing or there are glaring warnings or errors, the PR will be requested to complete that before submitting. What's changed is the FCR is also the content of the report is changed. It's different from the old closure report. So it's important to note if any closure reports have been shared under the old format, those will not to be used, and it's the new financial closure report, the link that you'll get later this month. That's the form to use for closure. Now, it's very similar to what is already submitted by the PR in the PUDR and the last PU. So it's very much following that same format, and it's the reporting content is enhanced compared to the prior closure report. So it's an expanded FCR, and it includes 9 specific finance tabs, which we'll talk about more in detail. This additional information is requested for corporate reporting to our boards and other internal uses. The triangulation, we'll talk about that later, is enhanced, and it will allow for better verification of any adjustments. And this will also allow for consistent financial reporting and reconciliation. So what is being simplified is that for the CTs, you will no longer, PRs, get an email from your CTs with an Excel file. You will get a link to the online form, and you will complete it in a similar way to the PU. So that's very quickly about some of the key changes around the financial closure report. And just to kind of go through kind of step by step here, right? If we think about the kind of regular process that for GC7, they have a grant and grant making, and maybe we just click through to at the end of the current reports, the final PU is shared. Then on the end of the IP date and the start of the next IP date, the new IP will continue to be or will start for the 3 years. But for the first 6 months, that's the closure period of the old IP. And then after the end of that 6 months, the financial closure report will be shared by email in the online form. And then you have until mid-August to complete the new financial closure report. Then up until 9 months after the IP end date, the grant will be in financial closure. And then after that, the grant will be in administrative closure up to, and again, all of these are up to 12 months at the end. And then when everything is finally closed, a formal notification will be sent to the PRs. So that's very high level how the closure process for the GC6 grants kind of interacts and lives in parallel to the new IP that's started. Now, to the content, pass it to you, Emily. And again, please use the chat for any of your specific questions, and our finance colleagues will come in at the very end to answer all of your questions. Over to you, Emily.
Perfect. Thank you, Darius. So here we can see all the tabs that are included in the FCR. So now we'll just go through each of them. So the first tab is the cover sheet, and this remains the same as what you would have previously seen in the PUDRs. So the only thing that's required for the PR in this section is to enter the exchange rates. Moving to the cash reconciliation, and this will be very similar to those who have completed a PC or will complete a PU, but for focus countries, also to note that this is what the cash reconciliation tab will look like in Partner Portal, so that there's a vertical breakdown of sources. So the first column will always be the regular funds, followed by any additional funding sources you have, such as C19 or M funds, and then the total is automatically calculated. So for section 2, there's no change. And then here in the second part of section 2, the second part of the income section, this is further detailed to show the relevant refunds to the PR. So here in section 3, same thing, it's broken down by funding source and there's no change. No changes to section 4. And then in section 5, I just want to point out a few changes or a few things just to note. So lines 5.1 and 5.2 are summed to give line 5.3, which is the closing cash balance for the IP. So here the PR only needs to enter data in line 5.4, which is the amount to be refunded to the Global Fund. So this is then used to calculate line 5.5, which are the funds to be transferred to the next IP. So ideally, if you have a C19 or MIP, everything should be refunded to the Global Fund, so that line 5.5 is 0. Now in section B, you'll note that lines 9.3 and 9.4 show the variances. So the variance between the bank statement balance and PR cash balance, as well as the variance between the bank reconciliation statement balance and the PR cash balance. So if there is a variance here, a comment will be mandatory to explain this variance. And that's one of the data quality checks that we'll take you through in more detail later in the presentation. So here we've also added some tips. If you do have any questions, like Daria said, please feel free to add them to the chat and we'll address them at the end. But we'll also be sending these slides around after the presentation so you can look at these tips later in more detail. So moving on to open advances, this is similar to the PUDR. Something to highlight at the top left-hand corner is the toggle between the funding sources. So you have your regular funds and then a separate tab for C19 and then another tab which will show the totals. So something else to note here is line 6.9, which is automatically filled from information on the SR cash reconciliation tab. So if we go to the SR cash reconciliation tab, just to note that column 11 here is new. So this is the net exchange gains and losses on translation of balances. And the information from this column is what feeds into that line 6.9 in the previous tab, the open advances tab. So moving on to commitments and obligations, this is the same as what you would have seen in the PUDR. And again, in the top left-hand corner, you do have the toggle between the various funding sources. For the commitments and obligations listings, there's no changes here in comparison to the previous PUDRs. For the expenditure report, the content here is the same as what those who will be completing a PU will see. So the PR only needs to enter information for the current year, and the cumulative expenditure is then calculated automatically. So this screenshot is zoomed into the breakdown by costing dimension, but the three-dimensional breakdown will remain the same. So it'll be cost group and cost input, module interventions, and then implementing entities. So the next tab, and Darius had alluded to it earlier, is the triangulation controls. So all other tabs will feed into this tab, and here the PR only needs to enter comments. So showing the second section of the triangulation tab, this expenditure check serves as an arithmetic check on the accumulation of expenditures by accumulating standalone period expenditures and comparing them against the reported period expenditures to check if there is an error. Moving to the third section in the triangulation tab, this shows the split of the cash balance by funding source. Generally, this contains automated cells except for 13.3.5, which is an adjustment to the C19RM cash balance. And this is used for examples that you will have seen in the previous notes. And again, we'll send around these slides after the session so you can dig into all the details. Next, on tax reporting. So just something to note here that unrecovered taxes are non-compliant, but these should not be duplicated in the non-compliant expenditures section. So if we move to the non-compliant expenditures section, this is the same as what you would have seen in the PU. So just to note that the uncovered taxes are considered non-compliant, but they should not be reported in this section, but should be reported in the tax reporting section. And again, on the left-hand side, you'll see the funding source breakdown in the various tabs. So you have the regular funds, a tab for C19RM, and then the total will be calculated automatically. So the note is there at the bottom of the screen as well. Unrecovered taxes are considered non-compliant. However, those should not be reported in this section, but rather the tax reporting section. So I know I went through that very quickly, and that was a very high-level overview. So please, if you do have questions, add them to the chat, and our finance colleagues will answer them at the end of the session. So moving into what this looks like now in Partner Portal. So here's an overview of the FCR process. So right now we're going to specifically zoom in on steps 2 and 3, which are the PR receives a notification and accesses the online FCR form in the Partner Portal, and the PR completes and submits the form in the Partner Portal. So this is a new landing page that the PR will see if they enter the web address directly into the browser for the Partner Portal. If you click on the link that's provided in the notification, it will take you directly to the report, as it has always. But if you do enter the web address into the browser, it will take you to this new landing page. So from the new landing page, there are two options to access your report. Option 1 is to click on the All Applications button, and option 2 is to click on the tile of the grant you're reporting on. So if you do click on the All Applications button, it will bring you to the screen, which outlines all the applications that the PR has access to in Partner Portal. So they'll click on the Principal Recipient Reporting button, which will take them to that application. If the PR wants to add a link to this to their homepage, they just need to click the star on the right-hand side of the screen. So once the PR is in the Principal Recipient Reporting application, they can see the tile of the grant they're reporting on, and they'll click it to open the online form. The online form will then open to the Submit tab, which shows a summary of all the content that's included in the report. So here you can see the financial section, and then later we'll show you a screenshot where it breaks it down into each tab in further detail. So just a few other tabs to note. One is the Download tab on the left-hand side, and this is where the PR can access a supporting Excel document to download and fill in. And Darius will get into the modalities of data entry a little bit later. And the second is the Help tab, and the Help tab contains a button which then opens the email to country support. So if you have any issues with the Partner Portal, you can always click on this Help tab, which will then open an email to the country support team. So to begin filling in the FCR in the online form, the PR will click Online Form, and this will open the FCR in a new tab. So once the FCR is opened in a new tab, the PR is ready to enter data, and for that, I'll hand it over to Darius. Thanks.
Thanks, Emily. So now that you're in the online form, there are 3 ways to enter data. And this is a repeat of some of the information that was shared in the PU section, but just acknowledging that some people, especially focus countries that were not submitting the PU or not in the prior session, it would be new to them. So please bear with me if we're repeating it. It's new for some folks. So there's 3 ways to get information into the system. The first is very similar to the current pulse checks, is to actually enter the information and type it directly into the online form. And if the PR needs to extract the data that's there into a working file, they can copy and paste the tabs manually from the online form into any working files that they need. And then again, to directly enter information into the online form. The second option is a supporting Excel, and this is an option, just to note and to be very clear that that this is not a mandatory way to do it. There's an option to have a supporting Excel if the PR needs to, and in that case they can download, enter data into the supporting Excel, attach it, and then import it into the online form. There's a third modality, which is a copy and paste functionality. We're calling it the data import wizard, but it's basically a way, and we'll go into the details, but it's a way to mass import a lot of data on specifically the kind of data heavy financial tabs. It's available for 4 tabs. You can see at the bottom which ones they are, but these are kind of the data heavy tabs. And this is to be used together with the direct entry modality. It's recommended for those data heavy tabs. And just to note, the online, the supporting Excel files are not part of the submission. What's being submitted is what's in the online form after passing all the data quality checks. So any supporting Excel, CSV files, other files that are used as working files as part of the submission cannot actually be used as part of your submission. It's only the online form. So let's go through each one by one. Direct entry. We'll just skip to the next slide, and you can see some examples of how you can directly input data into the online form. So here we're in the FCR. We go to the Open Advances tab as an example. There are 4 tabs. You see the full list of the tabs, 9 if I'm not mistaken. Yes, 9 tabs. And there, any of the cells that are in white are ones where the PR will be asked to enter data, and you can type it in just as you would on any other online form and provide comments as well. If there are different funding types, just to note on the prior slide, if there are different funding types between regular funds and C19, you can also click between them. So this is the direct online data entry modality. In the next slide, we'll go into modality 2, which is, again, optional, but it's where you can use a supporting Excel to help you. So as you saw, I think Emily was showing, yes, that you can download the Excel form through the online portal. It's important to only use the form that's available in the online portal, but you can download it. It will have baseline data there. You can input your results, your submission, your information that you want to attach into the online partner portal. Then you can attach it here for the import, because this is for the FCR. It's only the financial section, so there's only one import. You can import the entire financial section. It's important to note if there's data that's entered in the online form and you choose to use the import functionality, it will overwrite whatever has been inputted into the online form. So please be careful if you choose to use the import functionality. And again, data quality checks will need to be passed in order to get to the submission part. The third modality is the copy and paste. And again, for the data heavy financial tabs, the 4 that are indicated there, the 4 of the 9 that need to be submitted, it's also a recommended tool together with the online form or online entry. So here you can enter data into whatever working Excel files you might have, and you can copy and paste the selected data, the specific columns and rows from your worksheet, and paste that data directly into the online form as a batch. And then it's important also to review that the pasted data came in as expected. And like the other one, the data quality checks again still need to be passed and the submission happens. So just because you import the data into the online form or you paste it into the online form, that's not the end of the process. You still need to go through the data quality checks. So here are some screenshots, as you can see how you can use the copy and paste functionality. Here we're using the PR cash reconciliation as one example tab, but it's again available across the 4 more content data heavy tabs. Let's go to, I think this is back to you, Emily, on the data quality checks. Yeah, thanks.
Perfect. Thanks, Darius. So as Darius mentioned, no matter which modality you use to enter data into the system, the data will still need to go through these data quality checks. So the data quality checks are a set of automated actions that the system performs to flag irregularities. So these help to improve the data quality by flagging errors, but also to speed up the review process of the submitted data by the Global Fund. So there are 2 types of checks that you'll see in the partner portal. There are errors and there are warnings. So errors do not let the PR submit until the error has been corrected, whereas warnings will just flag that a justification comment is required. And once a justification comment is entered, the warning is overruled and the PR can proceed and submit. So just something to note, and again, as Darius said, some of this may be a repeat from the PU session, but for those who are joining us for the first time, please only enter a 0 when the result is 0. This is something that came out of the pulse check. If there is no result at all, please leave the cell blank and then provide a justification comment. So a full list of errors and warnings will be included in the PR reporting handbook, but also we have it as an annex to this presentation, and we'll be sending this around after the session. So just some examples of errors that you may see. Some that I had alluded to earlier, but others that we just wanted to point out for this session. So one could be the field cannot be blank. Please enter a numerical value, or in the financial case, you can enter a 0. So this is an error that you may see. Others, such as the absorption percentage, if it's less than 85% or more than 115%, this requires an explanation. So if the action required from the PR will be to correct the absorption percentage or to provide a rationale. So these are just a few examples of the warnings, or the errors that you may see when you're completing the data quality checks. But as we said before, a full list of all of the errors and warnings for the FCR report will be included in the annex of these slides. So moving just to show a few examples of the warning messages. So again, the warnings do not block submission, but they just require a justification comment for the user to proceed. So here are some of the examples of warning messages that may occur when you're filling out the FCR. So one that I had mentioned earlier is the variance in between cash reconciliation items 5.1 and 9.1 and 9.2. So if there is any variance here, this will need to be justified with a comment. Once you put a comment in, then even though the warning is on the screen, you are fine to proceed. So again, all of these errors and warnings will be listed both in the PR reporting handbook, which will be published in mid-July, and also in the annex to these slides. So what does this look like in Partner Portal? So once you have entered all your data, you can scroll up to the top of the page and you'll see in the middle of the screen this blue button that says Check Data Quality. So once you click on the Check Data Quality button, it will give you a summary of all the errors and warnings on the right-hand side. So if you just want to go back one slide, thanks. So yeah, on the right-hand side there, you'll see for this particular case that there's one error. Now zooming in, this is some feedback that we heard from PRs who did complete the pulse check, is that they weren't really sure how to expand the list of errors and warnings, so just wanted to draw to your attention. On the left-hand side, you can click on the down arrow, and this will expand the list so you can see all the errors and warnings. So in this case, we only have one error, and so here you can see the one error, which field it belongs to. So here it's item 6.1. You see a description of the warning or error, as well as the justification space to provide a justification comment if needed. So once all the data quality checks have been completed and the PR is ready to submit, they can navigate back to the Submit tab, and this again will show them a summary of all the tabs that are included in the report, as well as the mandatory documents that need to be attached. So here at the bottom of the screen, you can see the green check mark, which means that both mandatory documents have been attached. And once all the errors and warnings have been resolved and the PR is ready to submit, they can click on the blue button, which allows them to submit the form to the Global Fund. So if we again expand the tab on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see a list of all the tabs that are included in the FCR. So as Darius mentioned, the 9 tabs. If it has a green check mark on the left-hand side, this means that the errors and warnings have been resolved and the data quality checks have been completed. So you can see, for example, the expenditure report here has a green check as well as the information message that says no errors or warnings. So this tab is fine, it's complete, it's ready to submit. Whereas the other tabs, such as the cash reconciliation tab, it still says under the information that data quality checks are required, and on the left-hand side it has a white circle. So the PR will not be able to submit the entire form to the Global Fund until all of these tabs have the green circle, which means that all of the data quality checks have been completed and there are no remaining errors or warnings. With that, Darius, over to you.
Thanks, Emily. So this is the overview of the FCR process. So I think we've talked already about the first part of this, the PR receiving the notification and completing the online form. This is due after 45 days after the closure end date. So in this case, it would be 45 days after June 30th. Then it goes to the LFA review. So the LFA will again access the form in the same way that the PR accesses the form. The LFA will access the form in Partner Portal, complete their review and submit to the Global Fund in the Partner Portal. There's 20 days for this step to happen. And then it comes to Global Fund for internal reviews before the process is complete. What we're sharing here is the notifications that are triggered along the process, so that the PR is aware, and also the CT and the CCM in the case of when the PR submits the FCR. The CCM will be notified on successful submission by the PR of the FCR. There are important reminders along the way prior to the due date, and then at the due date and 5 days after. So those will be coming. So please don't be surprised when these notifications come out. They're there to help remind everyone and keep everyone aware of the key steps of the process. In the next slide, we talk about next steps. So we are here on Tuesday, July the 2nd. This is the English session. We'll have this exact same session in French on Thursday morning, Geneva time. And then for awareness, there'll be a session for LFAs at the end of July on both the PU and the FCR. There'll be another session for PRs in the fall, probably at the end of November or early December, just before the PUDR for the big cohort of grants that started January 1st, 2024, when the PR would be triggered after the end of December. So we'll have a session later on in the year. In terms of resources, we have many resources on the website. We'll be posting demos and infographics, and we'll be sharing a PR reporting handbook coming very soon. Emily mentioned. Also, it's important to note there's already the PU and the FCR kind of mock-up, the preview of the specific content, so you can peruse it, familiarize yourself with each, and that's available now, and we'll send it as a follow-up, but you can review all the specific content of every single tab of the FCR before you get the email notification. So you shouldn't be seeing it for the first time when you get the email notification. You can, even today, go through, familiarize yourself with the specific content that will be required. Obviously, this preview doesn't have the specific information for each individual grant, but it'll give you an overview of exactly which questions and data and specific information to fill in. So that's quickly on the resources. I think this is the end of the actual presentation. I saw in the chat many questions, and many of them are financial content questions. So I'll take the easy ones and then pass to my colleagues in finance for the finance specific questions. So the first one, Fadil or Bogi, to you, please. Actually, the first two.
Yes, sorry. So good afternoon to those who just joined. So is the balance systematically transferred to the new grant in GC7? So indeed, if the PR continues the implementation in GC7, the balance will be carried over. Sometimes the PR chose to refund, or they have to refund for whatever circumstances they may have, in which case they can refund it to the global fund, and obviously then their opening balance will be 0 for GC7. And then next questions. For those who are following modified accrual accounting, there's always a difference between the bank and the calculated cash balance. I suppose you mean 5.1 in the cash reconciliation. So in our template, you will see that we have section 9, specifically 9.2, where we request the PR to provide a bank reconciliation exactly for these cases, and also for commingled accounts and other issues. So you need to enter the bank reconciliation figure there and attach the justification file to this report. Over.
Okay, question 3. Bogi, this is still with you, please.
Okay, so for the give an example of 4.1 other reconciling adjustments, including those for previous reporting. So for example, if there was interest income in previous periods, which were not captured in the previous PUDR, the PR can correct those in this section. Obviously, for the current period, they still capture them in section 2.4, and this is the same treatment for bank charges or any other corrections, in fact, that needs to be done on the cash.
I think there'll be a few of them here for you, Bogi, so please.
There's an additional column introduced, cumulative global fund validated expenditure. The PR needs to provide explanation of budget versus expenditure variances. Please clarify whether the cumulative variances will be required. Global fund validated expenditure versus current period cumulative budget. So this column is meant to provide the PR with the information to the amounts validated by the Global Fund versus the amount reported by the PR. And this will help the PR identify all those adjustments that were made, that should have been done, that were required, and reflect these adjustments in the current year's figures. Okay, so the pre-populated section, there will be quite a few. So you obviously have the disbursement information and the opening balance. This you had before. The budget information, as always, it was pre-populated. Previous period expenditures will be pre-populated as well. The previous periods reported are also pre-populated. Tax information will be, and the previous periods reported information, including cash balances, expenditure, and open advances, will be in the triangulation. Okay, so regarding the cash from cash to be returned to Global Fund as per the FCR for GC6, can we expect, as in other grant cycles, that the available funds will be used to finance GC7 with the issuance of an IL? And is this the way forward on the this dependent on whether there is C19M component still ongoing? So for grants where we have both funding sources, right, C19 and HTM, at the FCR, we'll split these balances. Until now, we didn't split them because the current PUDR was not catered for that. But at this FCR, we'll have to split those balances. So there's two scenarios. Either both funding sources end at the same time, in which case C19M cash will have to be refunded to the Global Fund because that's a different sort of pot of money, let's say. And then the HTM part of the cash will be carried over to GC7 if the PR choose to carry it over. The other scenario is if the C19M continues under GC6, in which case the C19M cash will stay in the GC6 grant and will continue as part of the grant and in the future reporting periods as well. And the HTM cash will be either reconciled against GC7 or will have to be refunded, depend on what the scenario is for HTM. Okay, so there's a long comment here, but basically you will have two tabs there. One is the commitments and obligation listing, and the other one is the commitments and obligation tab. So if you remember the commitments and obligation tab, that was a section in the current PUDR that was included on the cash reconciliation section, which is basically just a summary of the opening and the closing balances. And here we are looking at a summary of those figures and the net change between the opening and the closing. The commitment and obligation listing is a full detailed list of each items that are either commitments or obligation. They are on different tabs now. And basically, there will be some activity description as it's pretty much the same as it is now. So there's an activity description. You have to select the relevant modules and interventions, cost inputs, include the dates, the expected dates and the actual dates of delivery, etc. And so basically just a repetition, goods and services must have been delivered by the end of the reporting date, or if it's an FCR by the end of the IP. This is when we talk about commitments. Other than that, they will be basically obligations, unless there's a next question on this one coming up, unless there is an exception approved. We'll explain that onwards. Under the SR cash reconciliation tab, should we exclude WAMBO and GDF? Yes, these are included under the PR's cash reconciliation section and also in the open advances. So should we talk about an obligation at the end of the project? Yes, we will always talk about obligations at the end of the project because they will have to be listed in this detailed listing that I explained before, because those will not be expensed under the GC6 grant unless they met the slippage criteria and were approved by the city. When choosing to use the import function,
I can take that one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, thanks. So for the import functionality happens depending on what you've put in either the copy and paste or the supporting Excel. So the data gets imported into the system and it remains there until the data quality check trigger is completed. So basically you would do the import, Once the data is there, then you would view the whole form online with the data that you've just imported. You press the button to do the data quality check, and then depending if it's perfect, there'll be no warnings and errors, and you can then proceed to submission. But if there are warnings and errors, and then you have to pass those, provide the clarifications where needed, or make the corrections before you can submit the online form. Question 11. So there's a question about comments. Boge, if you want to take it.
Sure.
Or I can take
So
it.
all financial sections, PCP or FCR have columns for providing comments. Please kindly confirm whether those are mandatory for all lines. Not always mandatory, but we would always appreciate the comments because that helps us understanding the information. Where comments are mandatory, it will be flagged and the system will basically have a blocking control. You will see it flagging red, so you will not be able to submit the form. Some examples would be, for example, if you have any non-compliant amount or any reconciling adjustment, as someone just asked before on 4.1, if there is any number entered there apart from 0, you will have to provide a commentary. Similarly to PR cash balance and bank statement or bank reconciliation balances in 9.1, 9.2. As well as if you have in the expenditure sheet, if you have variance that is deviating 15%, plus minus 15% from the budget. Okay, under the financial obligation, what is approved exception? So I'm going to provide an example. So if PR placed an order for a product, but PR obviously considered the lead time and expectation of the delivery before the end of the IP. So everything was going well. However, later the supplier informed the PR that for any reason that was not the PR's fault, delivery cannot be guaranteed before the end of the IP. And the supplier still promised to deliver within 180 days after the IP. So in this case, the PR would inform the CT that this is we call this a slippage, and provided a necessary justification and information to the CT. The CT then decided to approve this delay and as a slippage. So in the FCR, the PR confirmed that the delivery of these products happened indeed as promised by the supplier within the 180 days, in which case they are approved as an expenditure under the GC6 grant. So comments are required in expenditure reporting when a variance is more than 15%, meaning below 85 or above 115. Is that correct? Is it the change which remain for the PDR where it was? Yes. So now it's 15%, and this will remain for all reports. Are comments still allowed in FCR provided that activity has been realized before June? If yes, when is the payment date deadlines? So liquidation should happen before the end of the financial closure period, simply because you will not be able to submit your FCR if you don't liquidate those commitments, basically. For grants, including C19RM continuing, will any unused cash funds on GC6 regular fund be authorized to be transferred to GC7? I think it's a similar question we answered before, but C19RM fund follow a different set of rules and regulations. So C19RM funds will have to be refunded back to the global fund. Under the cash reconciliation tab, will global fund fill in the figure for item 1.1? PR cash balance beginning of current financial reporting period? The short answer is yes. The figure will be pre-populated, but there will be some there are some caveats to this, basically. So if your grant has no C19RM, it will be populated from the PUDR or a final PU. If your grant has C19RM, it will be populated from the post-check of the previous financial period. And if your grant is a focused portfolio, and therefore they did not have a pulse check, it will be pre-populated from the latest PUDR or final PU. In any case, if there is any correction that needs to be done, and this is another good example of the use of section 4.1, this is where those should be entered. Could we get clarification on tax report in the PUDR, please? Are the tax figures strictly for the reporting period or is expected to include tax unrecovered? So at the end of every implementation period, as part of the FCR, a final tax reporting status is now provided, which regroups all the tax reports that were in the previous PUDRs and also for the closure period itself. So this sort of final tax statement provides the opportunity for the PR to ascertain its final tax recoverable amount in the implementation period and take into consideration all the refunds they received from authorities during the IP, including the closure period. I'm not sure I understand it. Question 18, unallowables mean the ineligibles or the non-compliant? Could we clarify question 18, please?
Yeah, it looks like Elaine had, yes, ineligibles, they said in the chat.
No, so now the non-compliant expenditure tab is very simple. It has only one line, which is an entry field for the PR, which is where the PR will need to enter their self-identified non-compliant expenditures or the ones that they identified from their SRs.
Great, thanks, Bogi. And it looks like we have one final question in the chat. So it says, can PR report on the FCR valid expenses that were omitted, not reported in the PUDR?
Yes, so that's a short answer. So anything that needs to be corrected from the previous reports, that needs to be corrected in the FCR.
Great, thanks, Bogi. And then we have a callback to question 17. So it says on question 17 on tax, what figures are expected for the normal PUDR apart from the FCR?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yep, sure. So it says on question 17 on tax, what figures are expected for the normal PUDR apart from the FCR?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So the question came from Philip. I don't know, Philip, if you are able to unmute yourself maybe and come in. No. If not, Philip, if you can maybe just add to the chat a little bit later and we can always clarify. Okay, you can't unmute, no problem. If you do just want to type in maybe a clarification for your question, we'll make sure it gets answered. And I think that's the last one. That's the final one in the chat. So Darius, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Bogi, for answering so many questions back to back. You were in the hot seat and you did great. Thank you for that. Big appreciation to all of you PRs for spending the time, your morning, afternoon, evenings, to be here with us. We really appreciate it. We'll be sending you an email shortly with some of the resources that were mentioned here. Some of them are already available on the website. It was put in the chat, but we'll send you a summary. So thank you for spending this time with us. We really appreciate it. We look forward to seeing all of your successful submissions on time and with quality in August. So thanks so much and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. And I see a few last minute questions came in, so we'll make sure that we add those to the presentation and share them around after. So yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for joining.